I used to think I was just a temporary line of code in someone else's life, a placeholder in the project of a powerful man and the cold world of tech. Until the pregnancy test showed two pink lines, and he looked me in the eyes and said, "There's no line of code that says we have a future." My name is Rachel Porter. I was deleted from the life of one of the most powerful men in cybersecurity with a single command: exit. But I didn't disappear. I rewrote my program with 3 children, an old laptop, and a dream that would change how the world sees education, difference, and unconditional love. Before I share the rest of my story, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever been erased from someone's life but came back stronger, hit like and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next. The pregnancy test shook in my hands, 2 pink lines blurring through tears I didn't know were coming. 7 months. That's all Logan Hayes and I had shared. 7 months of stolen moments between board meetings and late-night coding sessions. I'd been hired to consult on an AI education project for HayesSec, his cybersecurity empire. Somewhere between debugging algorithms and discussing machine learning over takeout Chinese food, we'd fallen into something I thought was love. I practiced the words in my Austin apartment's tiny bathroom mirror. I'm pregnant. Simple. Direct. The kind of clean code Logan always praised. His corner office overlooked the Colorado River, all glass and steel like the man himself. When I told him, his face went through expressions like a computer processing an error it couldn't handle. Then, nothing. Just cold calculation. There's no line of code that says we have a future together, Rachel. The words hit like a system crash. I stood there, 29 years old, my whole world buffering, unable to process what I was hearing. "I'll handle this discreetly," he continued, already typing on his phone. "My lawyer will send papers, sign them, take the money, move on." "Logan, this is your—" "No." His voice cut through like a firewall blocking access. "It's your situation, not mine." The next morning, my university email wouldn't accept my password. Dr. Martinez, the department head, called me in with that careful face people wear when delivering bad news. "The Hayes Foundation is our largest donor, Rachel. They've expressed concerns about your performance." I was out within the week. No severance, no health insurance, no explanation that wouldn't violate the NDA Logan's lawyers had already sent. The email came that night. Subject line: exit protocol. Logan had written it himself. I recognized his sparse style. Every word calculated to cut ties, threatening legal action if I ever spoke about our relationship or attempted to establish paternity. There was a number at the bottom. Enough money to disappear. Not enough to raise a child in Austin's tech boom economy. I didn't sign. I didn't take the money. I just packed my used Honda Civic and drove until I found a mobile home park on Austin's outskirts where no one would ask questions and Logan's shadow couldn't reach. The Shady Grove Mobile Home Park sat between a truck stop and a field of wildflowers, close enough to Austin to see the skyline but far enough that people like Logan Hayes would never accidentally drive through. My new home was a 1978 single-wide that smelled like cigarettes and broken dreams. Rent was $400 a month. Utilities included if you didn't run the AC too much. That's where I met Hattie Miller. She knocked on my door the second morning, holding a casserole dish and wearing a t-shirt that read "I speak fluent Kobol." At 73, she moved like her joints were rusty hinges, but her eyes sparked with the kind of intelligence that made you sit up straighter. "You're the pregnant girl in 42B, she announced. Not a question. "I'm in 41B, made too much tuna casserole. You look like you haven't eaten a real meal in days." She was right. Morning sickness had turned into all-day sickness, and my savings were draining faster than a memory leak in bad code. Over lukewarm tuna and stories about her IBM days, I learned Hattie had programmed some of the first educational software back when computers filled entire rooms. "What kind of fool man walks away from his own code?" she asked after I'd told her everything, tears mixing with the cheap tea she'd brewed. "The kind who never wanted children in his program," I whispered. "Then write your own program, girl. Don't debug his mistakes." That night, I pulled out my laptop and opened the thesis project I'd abandoned when Logan hired me. an adaptive learning platform for special needs children. Kids with processing differences, sensory issues, language barriers. The code was rough, amateur, but the bones were good. "What are you calling it?" Hattie asked one evening, watching me work while she knitted something that might have been a scarf. "Kind Mind," I said. "Software that adapts to how kids actually think, not how we think they should think." She smiled. "Don't code for what's known, code for what's never been understood." 3 weeks later, at the free clinic off Rundberg Lane, the ultrasound technician went very quiet. She moved the wand across my growing belly, frowning at the screen. "Miss Porter," she said slowly, "I need to get the doctor." My heart stopped. "Is something wrong?" "No, just unexpected. You're carrying triplets, all identical. Three babies, no job, no insurance, no partner, living in a trailer park on Austin's margins." The doctor talked about high-risk pregnancy, bed rest, specialized care I couldn't afford. I nodded, not really hearing, my mind calculating an impossible equation. Hattie drove me home in her ancient Buick. "Three at once," she mused. "That's either a bug or a feature." "It's a system overload," I said, and for the first time since leaving Logan's office, I laughed. Bitter, broken, but real. "Then we better start optimizing," she said. And I knew I'd found something Logan's money couldn't buy. A friend who saw my pregnancy not as a problem to solve, but as code worth writing. At 7 months pregnant with triplets, I looked like I'd swallowed a beach ball. My ankles had vanished, my back screamed with every movement, and standing for more than 20 minutes made me dizzy. But bills didn't care about my condition. I found work at Rosa's Cafe, a 24-hour diner where the manager took pity on me and let me sit while rolling silverware. 4-hour shifts, $7.25 an hour plus tips. Between rushes, I'd prop my swollen feet on a milk crate and code on my phone, building Kind Mind one function at a time. Nights were for the real work. While other Austin techies were hitting 6th Street bars, I was debugging learning algorithms, my laptop balanced on my enormous belly. Hattie would sit with me, her ancient Unix machine humming beside my modern setup. "See here," she'd point at my screen with a knitting needle. "Your emotional recognition module is too rigid. Children's feelings aren't binary, they're quantum, existing in multiple states until observed." She was right. I rewrote the entire emotional processing engine to be fluid, adaptive, uncertain in the beautiful way children are uncertain. The contractions started at work, 2 months early. Rosa herself drove me to the hospital, cursing in Spanish at every red light. "Hang on, mija, those babies need more time to cook." But babies don't follow schedules any more than love follows logic. Liam came first, screaming and perfect at 3 pounds, 2 ounces. Eli followed, smaller but fierce. Then Jonah. The room went wrong kind of quiet when he emerged, blue and still. They whisked him away before I could touch him. "Lack of oxygen," the NICU doctor explained later. "We're doing everything we can, but there might be developmental delays. Motor function could be affected." I lived in that NICU for 2 weeks, pumping breast milk I could barely produce, watching my 3 boys fight in their plastic wombs. Liam and Eli graduated to regular cribs after 10 days. Jonah stayed, tangled in wires like a debugging project gone wrong. The bills came like error messages. Tone $200 a day, times 14 days, plus specialist fees, medication, equipment rental. The social worker spoke gently about payment plans, Medicaid applications, charity programs. I signed everything she put in front of me, knowing it would never be enough. "You could still contact the father," she suggested carefully. "Texas law requires—" No, the word came out harder than I intended. Their father doesn't exist in this code. Hattie appeared every morning at 6 a.m. with breakfast tacos and clean clothes. She'd sit with Liam and Eli while I held vigil over Jonah, whispering to him about the program we'd build together, how it would help kids like him who needed different ways to connect. On day 15, Jonah's eyes opened. Brown like his father's, but warm where Logan's were calculating. His tiny hand gripped my finger with surprising strength. "That's my fighter," I whispered, "my little exception handler." We went home to the trailer with medical equipment that barely fit, follow-up appointments I couldn't afford, and 3 boys who needed more than I had to give. But that night, with all three finally sleeping in the donated cribs Hattie had found. I opened my laptop and coded until sunrise. Kind Mind wasn't just a thesis project anymore. It was a promise to Jonah, to all three of them, that I'd build something better than the father who'd written us out of his life with a single command: exit. By the time the boys turned 5, our trailer had transformed into something between a home and a computer lab. I'd learned to negotiate at garage sales, trading website design work for barely used electronics. 3 small desks lined one wall, each with a refurbished tablet loaded with Kind Mind. Homeschooling wasn't a choice, it was survival. Daycare for triplets cost more than I made in 3 months. But watching my boys learn became the unexpected gift hidden in our poverty. Liam saw the world in pictures. He'd arrange his breakfast cereal in patterns before eating, build elaborate block structures that told stories only he understood. Kind Mind learned to feed him visual puzzles, art-based math, stories told in colors and shapes. Eli learned through sound. He'd tap out rhythms on everything: the table, his brother's heads, my keyboard while I tried to code. The software adapted, teaching him to read through phonic songs, math through beat patterns, science through the music of the natural world. And Jonah, my warrior who'd fought for breath, who'd been marked delayed in every medical chart. He learned differently. Slower, yes, but deeper. Where his brothers skimmed surfaces, Jonah dove deep. He'd spend hours on a single concept, turning it over in his mind like a precious stone. His motor skills lagged, his speech came later, but his emotional intelligence surpassed us all. "Mama's sad today," he'd announce, climbing into my lap with clumsy but determined movements. "The code isn't working right." He was always right. Kind Mind grew with them, learning from them. Each breakthrough my boys made, I programmed into the system. Each struggle became a new feature. I wasn't just building software anymore. I was encoding love into algorithms, patience into functions, understanding into data structures. Then Hattie got sick. The cough started in winter. By spring, she could barely make it to my door without stopping for breath. The day she gave me a key to her trailer, we both knew what it meant. "Just in case," she wheezed, but her eyes said goodbye. I found her 3 weeks later, peaceful in her recliner, her Unix machine still humming. The boys and I sat with her until the paramedics came, Jonah holding her hand and telling her about the butterflies he'd seen that morning. The lawyer who handled her estate looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Ms. Miller left everything to you," he said, sliding papers across his desk. "The trailer, its contents, and this. A bank account, not much, 5,000 change, but to me it was a fortune. There's also this." He handed me a manila envelope, my name written in Hattie's shaky hand. Inside, along with her will, was a letter. "Rachel, you continue the code." I couldn't finish. In my desk, second drawer, you'll find my journals from the Defense Department days. We were building something beautiful before they classified it all. Maybe it's time those ideas saw light. The boys are lucky, not because their father's rich, but because their mother's brave. Don't debug his mistakes. Build your own program. That night, after the boys were asleep, I opened Hattie's desk drawer. Stacks of yellow legal pads filled with handwritten code. Algorithms for adaptive learning that predated modern AI by decades. Notes about children's cognitive patterns, military kids with trauma, ways to reach minds that worked differently. She'd been building Kind Mind before I was born. I was just the compiler for her lifetime of code. I integrated her algorithms over the next months, watching my software transform from a personal project into something revolutionary. The boys tested every update, their different learning styles pushing the boundaries of what educational software could be. "We're not broken," Jonah said one day, watching his brothers work at their screens. "We just run different operating systems." 5 years old, and he understood what billion-dollar tech companies couldn't grasp. There was no standard install for human minds. Each one required its own configuration. The SXSW Education Conference transformed Austin every March. Tech evangelists and education reformers descended like a swarm of well-dressed locusts looking for the next big disruption. I'd watched from the margins for years, serving coffee to venture capitalists who tipped poorly and talked too loud about changing the world. This year was different. This year, I had a product. The application for the startup showcase almost didn't get submitted. My ancient laptop crashed twice while uploading the demo video. But at 11:58 p.m., 2 minutes before the deadline, it went through. The acceptance email came on the boy's 6th birthday. I read it 3 times before believing it was real. A booth, a presentation slot, a chance to show kind mind to people who could change everything. "Can we come?" Liam asked, chocolate cake smeared across his face. "Where else would you be?" I said. "You're my co-developers." The convention center loomed like a glass cathedral in downtown Austin. I'd dressed the boys in their best thrift store finds, matching polo shirts only slightly stained, khakis that almost fit. I wore the single professional outfit I owned, a black blazer that hid most of the baby weight I'd never lost. Our booth was a folding table between 2 slick displays that probably cost more than I'd made in 5 years. But when I opened the laptop and launched KindMind, people stopped. "It tracks emotional states?" A teacher from Houston leaned in, watching the demonstration. "More than tracks?" I explained. "It adapts. See how it noticed frustration in the user's click patterns? Now it's adjusting the lesson difficulty and offering a brain break." The boys demonstrated, each on a tablet, showing how the same lesson morphed to match their learning styles. Eli's screen danced with sound waves. Liam's painted concepts in flowing colors. Jonah's moved slower, but each interaction went deeper, building understanding layer by layer. "Mama made it for us," Jonah told a group of administrators, his words careful but clear. "Because we're all different kinds of smart." By afternoon, we had a crowd. I was explaining the algorithm's foundation, Hattie's work woven with modern machine learning, when the air changed. That shift you feel when someone important enters a room. I looked up into Logan Hayes' face. 6 years had sharpened him, added gray to his temples, but those calculating eyes remained the same. He stood at the back of the crowd, tall enough to see over everyone, his expression unreadable as stone. My voice faltered. Eli noticed first, his hand finding mine, then Liam pressing against my other side. Jonah, struggling with his balance, wrapped arms around my leg. "And these are your beta testers?" someone asked. "My sons," I managed. "My inspiration." Logan's face went white. He stared at 3 boys who carried his features like accusations. His dark eyes, his angular jaw, his sharp intelligence refracted through 3 different prisms. The presentation continued on autopilot. I answered questions, demonstrated features, smiled at the right moments. But I felt Logan's presence like a system error I couldn't clear. When the crowd dispersed, he approached. The boys tensed, some instinct alerting them to danger. "Rachel." Just my name, but weighted with years of silence. "Mr. Hayes," I replied, formal as a firewall. He looked at the boys, his sons, like complex code he couldn't parse. Liam stared back, defiant. Eli hummed nervously. Jonah studied him with that deep intelligence that saw through surfaces. "Are they mine?" I cut him off. "They're mine." He placed a business card on the table, precise as everything he did. "We should talk. We did talk 6 years ago. You made your position clear. Things change. Situations evolve. People don't," Jonah said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. "Mama says people are hardware. Only software changes." Logan blinked. Probably the first time in years someone had rendered him speechless. He turned and walked away, leaving his card like a trap I knew better than to spring. That evening, they announced the showcase winners. 3rd place went to an AI tutoring system backed by Google, 2nd to a VR classroom funded by Facebook. "1st place," the announcer's voice boomed, "goes to KindMind for proving that understanding trumps algorithms and love is the ultimate feature." The boys cheered. The audience applauded. A check for $50,000 and a meeting with Marcus Park, the legendary angel investor who'd funded 3 education unicorns. But all I could see was Logan's card, sitting on our kitchen table like an unexploded bomb, waiting to destroy the world I'd built with code and courage and 3 boys who deserved better than a father who'd tried to delete them before they were even born. Marcus Park didn't look like a billionaire. He wore jeans and a faded Berkeley hoodie, arrived at our meeting in a Toyota Prius, and ordered black coffee at the taco truck where he'd suggested we meet. "I've been watching your GitHub commits," he said, pulling up Kind Minds repository on his phone. "You code like someone who's desperate. That's a compliment." The boys were at the library with Miss Chen, the retired teacher who'd become our emergency childcare when I could afford her 10 an hour. I'd budgeted 2 hours for this meeting, praying it would change everything. "Tell me about this function." Marcus pointed to a complex emotional recognition algorithm. "It's elegant, but strange. Reminds me of something." "It's based on classified Defense Department work from the 1980s, I admitted. "My neighbor, she passed, was part of the original team." His eyes lit up. "Hattie Miller, I'll be damned. She turned down my job offer in '89, said she had better code to write." The connection to Hattie opened doors I didn't know existed. Marcus didn't just invest. He introduced me to the Texas Education Agency, connected me with special needs advocates, found developers who believed in the mission enough to work for equity stakes. Within 6 months, Kind Mind was in 3 school districts. The pilot data was incredible. Kids who'd been labeled difficult learners were thriving. The software adapted to dyslexia, ADHD, autism spectrum differences, trauma responses. It met children where they were instead of forcing them into standardized boxes. The Austin Chronicle ran a feature. "Local mom code solution to learning differences." They photographed the boys and me at our computers, looking like the success story everyone wanted to believe in. But success brought scrutiny. "Mom," Liam said one evening, looking up from his tablet, "there's stories about us online." I froze over the spaghetti I was cooking. "What kind of stories?" "About how we don't have a dad. Someone in the comments says they know who he is." My hands shook as I read the speculation on Reddit, tech forums, a particularly nasty thread on Hacker News. Logan Hayes' name appeared repeatedly. People had done the math. The timing of his foundation pulling funding from my university, my sudden disappearance from Austin's tech scene, the boys' unmistakable resemblance. "Is it true?" Eli asked quietly. "Is Logan Hayes our father?" I'd practiced this conversation 1,000 times, but looking at 3 10-year-old faces, intelligent, hurt, deserving of truth, all my prepared words evaporated. "Yes," I said simply, "he is." Jonah nodded like he'd always known. Liam's face cycled through emotions faster than his visual processor software. Eli just hummed, his comfort sound when processing difficult information. "Why doesn't he want us?" Liam finally asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Sometimes people can't see the value in what they create." "Like buggy code they abandon instead of fixing," Jonah said. "We're not buggy," Eli protested. "No," I pulled them close. "You're features, not bugs, the best features I ever developed." They insisted on research. Within days, they knew everything public about Logan Hayes, his company, his products, his philosophy of efficient systems and optimized outcomes. They watched his TED Talk about eliminating human error from digital security. "He makes software to keep people out," Jonah observed. "You make software to let people in." The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Not from Logan, from his lawyers. He was prepared to acknowledge paternity, establish a trust fund, arrange for appropriate contact with the children. The language was cold as compiled code. The boys read it together, huddled on Liam's bed like they were debugging a particularly complex problem. "We should meet him," Eli said finally, "but on our terms." "What terms?" I asked. Jonah smiled. That slow, deep smile that meant he'd figured something out. "We show him who we really are. Not the sons he didn't want, the people we became without him." They wrote the response themselves, each adding their part. Liam created a visual presentation of their lives. Eli composed a sound story of our journey. Jonah wrote the words, simple and devastating. "We'll meet you, but first, you need to understand what you missed, and why Mom's love was the only code that mattered." Hayes Sex headquarters hadn't changed. Still all glass and sharp angles, still designed to intimidate. What had changed was us. I walked in holding 3 confident boys' hands, wearing a dress bought with my own success, carrying a laptop loaded with software that was changing lives. Logan met us in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows. He'd assembled what looked like his entire leadership team, as if my boys were a hostile takeover requiring full defensive measures. Thank you for coming, he said formally, then stopped, staring at his sons properly for the first time. They were unmistakably his. The sharp intelligence, the analytical gaze, the way they dissected the room's weaknesses within seconds. But they were also mine. Warm where he was cold, inclusive where he was isolated, builders where he was a gatekeeper. You want to show us around? Jonah asked, his words careful but clear. Years of speech therapy had given him precision, if not speed. The tour felt like a debugging session. Logan explained his security software while the boys asked increasingly uncomfortable questions. So it watches everything students do? Liam studied the monitoring interface. To keep them safe, Logan said. It identifies potential threats. Like kids who learn differently? Eli interrupted. Would it flag me for tapping? Or Jonah for taking longer to respond? Logan faltered. The algorithm accounts for... No, Jonah said firmly. Algorithms don't account for humanity. They encode the biases of their creators. I watched Logan see himself reflected in his son's intelligence and their judgment. They weren't impressed by his success. They were horrified by his vision. The presentation he'd prepared, carefully crafted to win them over with promises of elite schools and trust funds, crumbled under their questions. Why did his software assume surveillance meant safety? How could he optimize childhood without understanding children? What gave him the right to monitor kids who couldn't consent? You want to control children, Liam said finally. Mom wants to free them. That's an oversimplification, Logan protested. Is it? Jonah pulled out his tablet, showing Kind Minds interface. This adapts to me. Your system would adapt me to it. Which one respects my humanity? The meeting deteriorated from there. Logan tried to shift to safer ground, college funds, internship opportunities, the advantages of the Hayes name. But the boys had done their homework. We don't want your money, Eli said. We want you to stop. Stop what? Stop making software that hurts kids like us, Jonah said. The ones who don't fit your optimized parameters. They'd prepared their own presentation. A devastating analysis of how Hayes-Sech's school monitoring system would impact neurodivergent kids, English language learners, children from poverty. Data I recognized from my own research, but filtered through their lived experience. This is what you're selling to schools. Liam's visual showed stressed children, flagged and labeled by algorithmic prejudice. This is what we're fighting with Kind Mind. Logan looked at me for the first time since we'd arrived. You coached them. No, I said. I raised them. There's a difference. The silence stretched, broken only by the hum of servers. Logan's fortress of code that suddenly seemed fragile against 3 boys who'd inherited his intelligence but not his coldness. We'll go public, Jonah announced. A letter to every school district considering your software, signed with our names. Hayes. You're Porter, Logan said quickly. Your birth certificates can be amended, Eli smiled. We researched that too. Texas law allows children to petition for name changes at age 14. 4 years to decide if we want to be Hayes or stay Porter. Or, Liam added, you could withdraw the school monitoring project. Admit it was flawed. Focus on security that protects without surveilling. They were offering him a choice, the kind he'd never offered me. Redemption through recognition of harm. A chance to debug his mistakes. Logan studied his sons, really studied them. I saw him notice Jonah's careful movements, the way Liam thought in images, how Eli translated emotion into sound. 3 different operating systems running on his hardware. I need to think, he said finally. Think fast, Jonah advised. We have a press conference tomorrow about Kind Minds' national expansion. Be a shame if reporters asked about our father's competing vision. We left him there, surrounded by his team and his choices. In the elevator, Eli started humming. Not his nervous sound, but something triumphant. You did it, I said, pulling them close. We did it, Liam corrected. The 3 of us, like always. Logan Hayes might be our biological father, Jonah said carefully. But Rachel Porter is our programmer, and her code is the only version we choose to run. The email came at 3 a.m., that dead hour when only coders and new parents are awake. I was debugging a particularly stubborn function when Logan's name appeared in my inbox. I'm withdrawing school guard. Press release goes out at 9 a.m. The boys were right. That was it. No apology, no elaboration, Just tactical retreat disguised as enlightenment. But it was enough. The tech press exploded. Hayes Sec abandons controversial school monitoring system. Privacy advocates claim victory. Nobody connected it to 3 boys who'd stared down their billionaire father and won. Our press conference that afternoon was supposed to be routine. Announce Kind Minds' expansion to 50 districts across Texas, thank our investors. Demonstrate new features. Instead, it became something else. "Ms. Porter," a reporter called out, "any comment on Hayes Sec's withdrawal from the education market?" I looked at my boys, sitting in the front row wearing matching Kind Mind t-shirts. They nodded. "Competition benefits everyone," I said carefully. "But cooperation builds better futures. We're glad to see the industry moving toward respecting children's autonomy. Is it true Logan Hayes is the father of your children?" The room went silent. I felt the old panic rising. The same terror from that day in Logan's office, multiplied by cameras and consequences. Then Jonah stood up. "I'll answer that," he said, walking carefully to the podium. His brothers flanked him, a practiced formation for when his balance wavered. "Logan Hayes contributed genetic material." Jonah spoke clearly into the microphone. "But Rachel Porter contributed love, sacrifice, and code that sees us as we are. So when you ask who our father is..." He paused, looking directly at the cameras. "The answer is nobody. We have a mother. That's all we need." The room erupted. Questions flew like exception errors, but the boys stood firm. They talked about Kind Mind, about learning differences, about software that adapted rather than standardized. They redirected every attempt to make this about Logan back to the work that mattered. "One last question," the moderator called. "What's next for Kind Mind?" This time, I took the microphone back. "We're partnering with the Department of Education on a national initiative. Every child in America deserves software that sees their potential, not their deficits." Marcus Park was grinning in the back row. He'd orchestrated the federal connection, but the boys had sealed it with their presentation to the Secretary of Education. 3 different learning styles demonstrating how one program could serve them all. That night, Logan called. First time in 7 years I'd heard his voice on the phone. "They're remarkable," he said without preamble. "Yes, I want to. I'd like to know them, if you'll let me." I thought about rage, about the nights I'd cried over medical bills, about Jonah's first seizure when I'd been terrified and alone. But I also thought about forgiveness, not for Logan, but for my boys. They deserve to make their own choices about their father. "That's up to them," I said. "But Logan, you approach them as who they are, not who you want them to be. They're not code to be optimized." "I'm beginning to understand that," he said quietly. "Rachel, I'm sorry for all of it." Sorry was just a word, like love or future, meaningless without the code to back it up. But it was a start. The boys decided to meet him monthly. Neutral ground, usually a park or museum. They taught him about their interests, challenged his assumptions, slowly debugged years of harmful patterns. He learned that Liam communicated through art, that Eli needed music to think, that Jonah's processing delays masked profound insight. Kind Mind went national that fall. We rang the opening bell at NASDAQ, not because we'd gone public, we'd refused all acquisition offers, but because they wanted to celebrate technology with a conscience. The boys wore suits for the first time, looking uncomfortable but proud. "You know what this means?" Eli whispered as cameras flashed. "What?" I asked. "We're not just surviving anymore, we're thriving." He was right. The emergency credit cards were paid off. The trailer was a memory, replaced by a real house with separate bedrooms and a yard. The boys attended a school that used Kind Mind, where their differences were celebrated rather than pathologized. But more than financial success, we'd achieved something harder: wholeness. Not despite our broken start, but because of it. The night before the boys' 11th birthday, I found them in Jonah's room, huddled around his computer. "What are you working on?" I asked. "A new feature for Kind Mind." Liam showed me his sketches. "For kids with divorced parents, or no parents, or complicated families. It's called Family Flex," Eli added, "because families aren't binary, they're quantum." "Like Hattie said," Jonah smiled. existing in multiple states until observed. I watched them code together. Logan's intelligence guided by my love, creating something neither of us could have built alone. They were debugging the pain of their origin story, transforming it into healing for others. Mom? Jonah looked up. We want to add something to the About page. He showed me their draft. Kind Mind was created by Rachel Porter and her 3 sons, who believe every child deserves software that loves them as they are. Dedicated to Hattie Miller, who taught us that the best code comes from the heart. It's perfect, I said, my voice thick with tears I didn't try to hide. No, Liam corrected gently. It's functional, and that's better than perfect. That's what we were. Functional. A family that worked not because it followed expected patterns, but because we'd written our own specifications. Logan would always be part of their code, a subroutine that ran in the background. But I was their main function, the love that compiled their differences into strength. As I tucked them in that night, still, even at almost 11, I thought about Hattie's words. Don't debug his mistakes. Build your own program. We had, line by line, error by error, breakthrough by breakthrough, a program built on acceptance rather than optimization, on love rather than logic, on the radical idea that every child, every person, deserved software that helped them become more themselves, not less. The IPO offers kept coming. Tech giants wanted to buy us, absorb our difference into their standardization. But some code was too precious to sell. Some programs existed not to maximize profit, but to maximize humanity. Mom? Jonah called as I was leaving. I love you. I love you too, baby. No, he said seriously. I mean, I love you in the way Hattie loved code, in the way you love us, unconditionally compiled. I kissed his forehead, then Eli's, then Liam's. My 3 exceptions that had become the rule. My boys who'd taught me that the best programs weren't the ones that ran without errors. They were the ones that transformed errors into features. Outside their window, Austin's skyline glittered with promise and possibility. Somewhere in those towers, Logan was probably still coding, still optimizing, still trying to control the uncontrollable. But here in this house built by courage and kind mind, we'd found something better than perfection. We'd found home, and that was all the code that mattered.